And welcome back. On January 20th, President Joe Biden was sworn in as the 46th President of the United States. Moving with urgency, President Biden signed several executive orders, actions, and memorandums aimed at rapidly addressing the coronavirus pandemic, dismantling many of President Trump's former policies, including halting funding for the construction of the border wall, reversing Trump's travel ban targeting largely Muslim countries, imposing a mask mandate on federal property, and ramping up vaccination supplies, as well as requiring international travelers to provide a proof of a negative COVID-19 test prior to traveling to the United States. A lot of policies enacted by the Biden administration. Joining us now to share more is the former vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, Michael Blake, and good to have you.
Good to be with you, D. Always. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, brother. I'm doing good. I put in there former vice chair of the Democratic National Committee. Your reign has come to an end. Talk to us first and foremost about that.
I had the great honor of being a national vice chair and thinking about what we accomplished when we joined and were elected in 2017. Democrats did not have the House, did not have the U.S. Senate, did not have the White House. So we ended with the trifecta. So you got to end on top. And it was a 4-year term, more than 400 legislative flips from Republican to Democrat. We've seen a lot of great things happen. So it was an honor. It continues to be an honor. But now you just get ready for the next level of service.
Right. So we talk about the Biden administration. That's the next level of service. We know that the president, as I said, the lead, gave out a lot of executive orders. What do you think we can expect for the Biden administration moving forward?
A real president, right? Someone who's not going to lie, but actually lead. You know, you think about how immediately, executive orders, as you mentioned, everything from rejoining the Paris Accord, what are we doing around racial equity, making sure we amplify what happens around producing of vaccines. The effort that's been announced on Monday here as it relates to what's going on Buy America, so we can make sure we support that effort. Each of the days that are going to be coming up, there'll be more rolled out themes from executive orders. Having a press secretary in Jen Psaki, who is not lying when she's at the podium. That's what's supposed to be happening here. But let's also be clear. The magnitude of the moment is a multitude of crises I don't think any president has ever endured. When you think about FDR, when you think about Lincoln, yes, no question, those critical crises. But you're talking about an economic pandemic, a health pandemic, a racial pandemic, and climate change all at the same time. And I really believe Joe Biden is the most qualified person to ever be president when entering the presidency. He's ready for the moment. Kamala Harris as our vice president is a perfect 1-2 punch to have there. And when you think about what's going to be occurring from an impeachment trial to a pandemic to confirmations, this is why we have to move swiftly. And the executive actions and orders, Darren, when we think about why they're so critical, is because you can't wait. You can't wait for the back and forth negotiations for some of these elements. $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill that they're negotiating. But people need help. People in the Bronx need help. People in New York need help. People across the country need help. And Joe Biden's going to help them.
Yeah, a lot of what we're going to be talking about a little bit later on the show is about food insecurity. I'll come back and talk to you about that. But I do want to ask this question. We have seen in President Biden's cabinet and his administration, probably one of the most diverse cabinet that we've seen ever, practically, that can be arguably said ever. How does that translate to boots on the ground, people at home? What does that mean for the people at home seeing a diverse cabinet coming out of Washington? What can the residents of Bronx, New York City expect to see?
Well, it's actually tied to both points. When you mentioned food insecurity, I know you say you're going to be discussing that later on, but also the cabinet. Why is that relevant? Because you have people who might have walked on different journeys, but they're on the same path for justice. So when you think about having someone like a Javier Becerra, a former member of Congress, Attorney General from California running HHS, transformational. When you think about Lloyd Austin, the first Black defense secretary, what will that mean for a department to make sure that our troops are kept safe and our families kept safe? I come from a military family household myself. My oldest brother served the Army for 29 years. It matters when you have someone that's attentive to those dynamics. It matters when you think about what's happening across the board for CA, Council of Economic Advisors, ran by Dr. C.C. Rouse, who was over at the Woodrow Wilson School. So when you have people that look like us, come from our background, come from our walk of life, it makes it much more fair and possible to realize those dreams. And Darren, I know you said you're going to talk about it later, but you think about for food and other elements like that, you need to have people who have empathy.
Right.
Who actually are coming to the table and recognizing, what we did here in the Bronx through the Bronx Community Relief Effort, and the Bronx Foundation, and World Central Kitchen, and Bistro, and all the other entities that came together. It's because you had people who had empathy. And so I think it's applicable to your question about the cabinet, because you have people that are coming to the table, not trying to make money for themselves, not trying to duck responsibility, but because they actually want to help people.
Yeah. Well, let me go right here then and talk a little bit about that. Talk about your district. Talk about what's going on in the borough of the Bronx. When it comes to the issue of food insecurity, we talked about all those great organizations that are taking part. Do we see a dent being made in food insecurity?
Tremendously. When you think about more than 2 million meals were distributed thanks to World Central Kitchen. And again, Bronx Community Relief Effort, Bronx Community Foundation. Go to thebronx.org so you can see what's happening there, so you can learn about the efforts there. You think about Mott Haven Bar and Grill, Bistro, all those different entities. Quite frankly, many Bronxites would not have a meal if it wasn't for that effort. And so a dent has been made. But we're also realizing is that we're going to be at this for a while. People have been wondering, well, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris become president and vice president. It's not a light switch. It's going to take time. It's going to take several months. Before we came on, Darren, I was having a conversation. We were talking about this off air and checking in on my mom and just making sure she's getting what she needs while she's in another state right now. And all of us are doing that. All of us thinking about that, whether it be vaccinations, whether it be food, whether it be housing. And so urgency of the moment has arrived here, where you're going to need federal action, i.e. the FEED Act, which is a bipartisan bill that Chef Jose Andres and Nate Mook and their team are leading, because we have to get more food onto the table and make sure we're making it more affordable so that people are not wondering about that. We have to make sure there's more eviction protection so that you're not being evicted and so you can actually stay in your homes. But we got to get people money in their pocket because the fundamental element here in the Bronx within our district, and shout out to Chantel Jackson, who's now succeeding me in the assembly, that they're going to be thinking about. We have so many retail jobs here. We have so many people that are used to foot traffic. But when you don't have that happening, it leads to less revenue. We have so many restaurants here. When you have less foot traffic, it means to less revenue. And so all those dynamics lead to a scenario that if you can't pay your bills and you're hungry, hard things, difficult things, challenging things happen. And that's the urgency of what's happening here and why we need for Biden and Harris, for Majority Leader Schumer, for Speaker Pelosi, and everyone on down to be incredibly successful so that we can actually have what we need here in the community.
Give me a little bit about what you see in the community with regards to these not just unemployment, but businesses. I've had conversations with business owners. I've had conversations with the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, BID. There is a lot of frustration that there could be a lack of local businesses in our area simply because they're not going to be able to rebound from COVID. What can be done, and what are you hearing?
Well, shout out to Michael Brady, CEO of the Third Avenue Business Improvement District, because if it wasn't for Michael Brady, I don't think a lot of people would be able to make it right now. And what do I mean by that? Because they've been able to partner up with the Bronx Community Foundation and others, to Judy Diamond, here, so many of the great allies, to help provide support for people who didn't have it. And what does that practically mean? That meant grants out to small businesses who didn't have revenue coming in, to partner up with the leadership of Jill Johnson and others at Institute for Entrepreneurial Leadership, for example, so that we can talk to you about what changes you need to make to be able to survive in this environment. But we're going to have to reimagine the economy and reimagine business. For example, how many entities did not have access to what's going on in financial technology? So when Spring Bank and Ponce and others came together and said, let's partner up, and this is an op-ed I wrote with Natalie Molina-Nino specifically about this, there wasn't enough support for our community development financial institutions to get access to capital and get those loans out and get any kind of capital out because of financial technology limitations. And so why is that relevant to your question? If they don't have capital to help the business and the business is not getting revenue, then businesses are shutting down. And so it's that kind of approach that has been happening, that has to continue to happen. But we do have to think about this differently. How do we make sure that you're utilizing technology so that people can be able to order their food and their products? So it's not just based upon foot traffic, but it can be based upon online traffic. And so those are the creative elements there. Over my shoulder, Darren, I'm seeing it in my back shot, is a pillow I have from a hip hop museum in Paris that I visited to witness what they were doing there. Why is that relevant to this question? Because many of us are focusing on the elements of music and the elements of hip hop to build a hip hop museum here in the Bronx, have that open by 2023, the 50th anniversary of hip hop. Shout out to Rocky Bucano and that entire team. Why is that relevant? Because it will create job opportunities. It will create entrepreneurial opportunities. And that's going to be in the Bronx, in the Mott Haven section of the Bronx. So all that to say, we have to get creative in how we reimagine our communities in this environment. None of us wanted a pandemic, but the pandemic's going to create opportunity.
Yeah. And we know that rebounding from this pandemic is going to take some time, and getting through this is going to be a huge lift for a lot of people. Talk to us about what we can expect to see coming out of government in the next little while.
So much. And you getting the full experience right now. Yes, you are hearing my door buzzing right there. What can we expect out of government? What we have to expect out of government is, again, first, empathy. We're talking about more than 400,000 people whose lives were taken, which we shouldn't have had because of a colossal failure of a corrupt presidency in Trump and Pence. But now we have to move with speed, with executive orders, executive actions, with funding, with an effort that's happening on the state level through the state legislature and their budget process now beginning, and to Speaker Hasty and his leadership, to efforts that are happening as well as it relates to what's going on in quarterly with the city council leadership of Speaker Corey Johnson as well. All of these elements are a part of this process. We're gonna have a federal government that's gonna make sure as well that when our door rings in the middle of a TV interview, you can do that all at the same time, right? So, in that vein, it's that approach that we have to think about the intersectionality of it all. Infrastructure is gonna be paramount when we think about what's going on with the MTA and our roads and bridges and our transit systems. What's going on as it relates to food. Again, coming from the federal government with the FEED Act. What has to happen around business, minority, women, small business, tribal nations as well. All a part of the dynamic of changing the game for us to all have fairness across the board. So what we're doing in this moment is realizing very quickly, very succinctly, very clearly that we have to have a strategy, city, state, federal, that provides resources on the ground in targeted and clear ways. When we were talking about state and local government funding, why is that the case? Why is that so necessary? Because at the end of the day, if our local governments are starved and don't have the resources to pay the basic necessities and provide the support that you need, how do we have quality of life in our communities? And so those are the dynamics. But Darren, I think to me, again, I go back to the premise, how do we reimagine our city, reimagine our borough, reimagine our country? We should not go back to how things were in March of 2020 in our economies. We have to make sure we're focusing on equity and training and developing the next generation and providing funding towards that. Support what's going on at the Knowledge House, support what's happening at Mass Ideation. We're talking about training and the pipelines around technology. Support our local bids so they can actually develop and mobilize in that way. Support the EOCs of the world so that you actually focus again on training. Because at the end of the day, when we emerge from all of this, we need to emerge stronger and clearer and focus on equity, not just equality.
Michael Blake, we'll leave it there and go get your door. We're gonna finish this segment by saying we'll talk to you later. You can catch him on Democrats.org if you want more information. Mike, thanks so much for being with us.
Absolutely, and now I'm gonna find my fraternity brother who's been trying to find me right now.
All right, you take care, brother. We'll talk to you soon. And we'll be back. We got more Open coming up right after this.